Welcome to Rehash, a Web3 podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Rehash, a Web3 podcast. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and today we're speaking with Simon de la Rouviere, founder of Untitled Frontier and an early Ethereum developer who helped develop the ERC20 standard, the standard for fungible tokens. Simon has since pivoted his focus towards more of the creator economy, NFTs, and storytelling, all of which we'll be talking about in this episode. But before we dive into our conversation with Simon, here's a quick word from the Web3 projects who helped make the season possible.
Web2 Social has become a world of walled gardens, where platforms own your data, your content, and your community. But Lens Protocol is a community garden, a user-owned, composable, and decentralized ecosystem designed to let Web3 social apps bloom. When you create content on Lens, you own it, you control it, you take it with you from app to app, and you decide how it's monetized. Instead of chasing ads and algorithms, you set the value of your work, and your community collects it directly from you. Here at Rehash, we'll be experimenting with this ourselves by posting all content from Season 3 on Lens, where our community can now truly interact and grow with us. So bring your photos and videos, your GMs, and your friends, and come join the new era of social media on Lens Protocol. Go to claim.lens.xyz to claim the last social media handle you'll ever need. And be sure to follow rehash.lens.
Contributing to a DAO can feel like this. Contributing to several DAOs can feel like this. But it doesn't have to. With Avenue, you can filter out the noise, get to know more DAOs, and start contributing right away. Avenue allows contributors to form organic teams to work together on the things they love. This means DAOs can operate, coordinate, and collaborate at a scale that used to be impossible. Because working together in a DAO should be like making music. The drummers drum, the singers sing, and when collaboration leads the way, a song emerges. No more relying on the core team to get things done. It's time to get your community contributing. To give your DAO the information they need to know, the tools they need to self-organize, and the spaces they need to work together, visit avenue.place.
Hey guys, thanks for hopping on here. I just wanted to touch base real quick.
What's up, Diane?
What's up? So first of all, I just wanted to say thanks, Tyler, for taking these meeting notes. They look great.
I didn't take those. I'll take credit for it, though.
Wait, that wasn't you? Do we know who it was? And who's been posting those hilarious meme videos on our Twitter?
Oh, I have no idea. There's a lot going on here, though. Like, how are we supposed to keep up with what everyone's doing?
I don't know. It feels like pure chaos being in a DAO sometimes. Ellie, what was that thing you were talking about that helps DAO contributors add and organize all of their contributions?
Oh yeah, it's called Govern. It's like GitHub for DAO contributors.
Ooh, that sounds cool. How does it actually work?
Yeah, so it's actually a protocol where DAO members can add any task they've completed as a contribution. And then their fellow DAO members can attest to them to confirm that those contributions were valid without the need for a core team to do so. What you end up with is a simple bottom-up way for members to build out the DAO's contribution graph themselves. It gives contributors more power and freedom. It makes it a lot easier to accurately reward everyone. DAO members actually own all of their contributions, so if they want to jump into another DAO, they can actually prove they know their stuff.
Okay, I'm sold. Can it be on chain?
Of course, but on Gnosis chain, so transactions are super cheap.
Ooh. All right, yeah, I'm down. Diane?
Yeah, for sure. Let's set it up. What's the link, Ellie?
Just go to govern.app, and that's govern without the E, so GOVRN.app.
Perfect. All right, well, if you guys got this, I got to jump back to another call. Hey, Simon, welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
Hey, yeah, super excited to be here. Going well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. So you are super crypto OG. You've been in the space since, I think, 2011, if I'm not wrong. And then you're one of the earliest Ethereum developers. You actually helped develop the ERC20 standard. So can you sort of tell us what your background is and how did you get into crypto so early and how has the space evolved in the last decade plus?
I think my interest came from the fact that, I've always been a programmer, like enjoyed programming. And then at university, I was studying business and marketing with like some programming courses. So for me, it was always like programming for its use in the world, not like programming as its pursuit, as a pursuit in itself. So it's more just interesting how technology relates to society. So as one does go on rabbit holes on the internet and suddenly discover something like Bitcoin was incredibly fascinating to me because it combined unique computer science stuff that I was interested in at the time, but also like interfaces with politics, with economics, with broader financial systems, the internet. It just combined everything that I loved. And I saw it, I was like super interested. And then for 2 weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It's like, let me actually download and run my own node and see how this stuff works. So from then on, it was just sort of like, it's interesting. And then in 2013, when it didn't seem like it was going to die and this thing actually seemed like it was going to work, I kind of started jumping in headfirst and actually started programming. Back then it was just, just Bitcoin that was around. It was incredibly difficult and a struggle to make Bitcoin try do anything interesting. And when Vitalik back then in 2014 said, hey, look, like we understand that Bitcoin is technically difficult for people to build new stuff with, and it's not necessarily ideologically friendly to developers. There was this period where people would try to make interesting things with Bitcoin, but other developers would say like you're spamming the chain and you had to like basically hack the system to make it do interesting things. So when it was a new project was presented as ideologically friendly for developers and pragmatic and technically friendly for developers, was like, this is what I've been looking for. So for me, it was just really like, I saw this as a software that was just, number one, just really interesting. And secondly, with wondering and pondering what we can use this technology for. And you mentioned the creator economy pivot, but for me, it was always the reason why I got excited and why I started development initially was I saw it as a tool for creators. And the first use case really was just like, hey, let's help creators get paid. I grew up in South Africa, and as a teenager, I made some games in my spare time, and I couldn't sell them because I was from South Africa. Like it was even me as someone that had access to a computer and had access to internet, even I couldn't be able to figure out how to sell this stuff versus say someone from America at that point in time. So I was also like, how do we use this technology for creators? And so over the course of this period from 2013 to, the past almost 10 years now, it was just an active pursuit of scaling the layers, going from, I want this to exist, but this stuff doesn't exist yet. So let me go back. And so then it was like, hey, I want tokens to exist, but there's nothing like this. We need the standard. So it's like, let me help the people to design the standard and actually build some of the first implementations to like, even now when I did some of the on-chain coding stuff, it's like, oh, this stuff isn't supported by OpenSea. Let me talk to the OpenSea developers to support some of the on-chain things. So there's always this up and down the stack, but the kind of pivot towards more creator economy stuff is that I feel like it's finally been the case that a lot of the core infrastructure stuff has been solved. And there's obviously still a lot to do, but like as someone that wants to implement stuff and create stuff, I don't have to now go too deep into the lower stacks anymore. I can just code now, actually create stuff that I think is cool and useful.
That's fascinating. I didn't realize your gaming background and that was actually what drew you into the space, because that was what initially got my interest about crypto too, was the application of decentralization for content creators. I was a full-time travel blogger before I joined the space. And so I experienced firsthand like the challenges of monetizing content in the Web2 world. And that was sort of the angle that brought me in. So that's super fascinating that you got in from a similar angle, but from a gaming perspective instead of just, like written content. Very cool. So when we talk about the creator economy, there's been this huge discourse recently about, the creator economy, the ownership economy. It's going to change everything. A lot of people are talking about this on Twitter or elsewhere. And I'm not sure how much people actually understand what they're saying and what this actually means. So as a primer, could you sort of just give us a high level of, from your perspective, how will the creator economy change in the Web3 world?
That's a big question. I always gravitated towards the technology because one, like I said before, like just making payments easier. Like when you think about it, like it would be incredibly unlikely to see 10, 20 years from now, a world where all the banks have super secure APIs where any developer anywhere can just program routing money and value across the world. It just seems incredibly unlikely to happen. So that in itself is really cool. The fact that we can just go, hey, I like what you've done. I'm paying you directly through some signature in my browser, not having to go through some additional systems that might not give people the right access to do so. So that in itself is really cool. I think what's interesting is that Web2, for the most part, like the sort of ways in which we supported people creating stuff in the Web2 world has always felt like it's a systems plugged onto this thing that we just invented, and like we're trying to put like round pegs in square holes kind of thing, where it's just like, hey, I'm a successful content creator. How do I make money? Oh, I kind of like have to use ads, but it's like the incentives doesn't always match up, because like I'm annoying my users by putting ads in front of them, and it's like this kind of awkward relationship where the things don't really fit together. Jonathan Mann, for example, recently tweeted like a simple thing for his like song a day. It's like, instead of trying to invent all this other stuff that you're trying to sell, you could just sell the thing directly to people. So I think ultimately, like the value I derive from it is like just having a more direct relationship with creators, and allowing fans to have more direct relationship with me as a creator, without saying like, hey, I'm putting up some content gating on Patreon, or hey, I'm selling actually like access to the content, like, because that's a traditional model. Like I've sold music, I've sold books and stuff. That's a traditional, you sell access to the content. But I just want people to be able to support me, but it also doesn't exclude people from it. So there's like those kind of like juggling all those different kinds of incentives. And I think that really is the core thing for me. It's like creating that more direct channel to people as like the first fundamental reason why it's great and interesting. I totally understand why people sometimes say, but why is this better? And for me, when I first found the technology, it's just infinitely interesting about imagining what we could build. It presents an opportunity, and that is exciting. Now that we see, for example, the first big NFT sort of hype cycle, kind of like the tide receding a bit, now there's like the interesting bubbling under again of people trying different things with the technology. And that was always the interesting part for me, is to go, how do we create cool stuff, and how do we support the creators? There's an entire Web2 world where you're still awesome. Go use that. But what about all these other different things that we can experiment with?
Yeah, I think that relationship between the creator and their fans piece is a huge part of it. And along the same lines, it's not only do you allow your fans to have a closer relationship and a more direct relationship to you as the creator, but you also give them the opportunity to be an owner, a part owner in your content or whatever you're creating. I think that's something that is really like pretty unique to Web3 and that we haven't really seen much of. So I know you're a big experimenter. You love experiments in Web3, especially in this creator economy space with NFTs and things like this. What are some of the coolest experiments that you've seen run in the space? And you mentioned Jonathan Mann, and I think what he's doing is super cool with Song a Day that he turned to Song a DAO. What we're doing here at Rehash is like sort of similar to that in some ways too. But I'm curious to hear any other experiments you've seen with, NFTs in the creator economy.
Oh, there's so many. I think what usually happens in these kind of hype cycles is that there's like this period where people make stuff that looks like it's the Web 2-ish, right? It's like, oh, this kind of stuff looks marginally better, but people use it because it's Web 3, and maybe the speculation side drives adoption. But then this period where just like people take what is already there and then invent new stuff. It was like the 2017 ICO era, where just let's make tokens look like the real world version of tokens, and exchanges that work like the real world exchanges. And then in that trough of period after the 2017 ICO era, it's like automated market makers came along, which is this presented actually a fundamental improvement over the way the traditional world works. So for me, there's a lot of exciting projects that experiment with like new, unique ways to try things. So let me give you some examples. I think what I gravitate towards a lot is like projects that actually use the medium's native capabilities more so than others. So while like maybe a lot of the space now looks like, oh, all these 10K PFP collections, that's great. There's like innovation there in terms of building cohesive communities and sharing ownership, and that's great. But I think what's more interesting is when you actually use the fundamental value propositions of the technology. And one of them, for example, is the ability to track provenance of not just the objects themselves, but also people's relationships with each other. So, for example, there's one art project by Taken's Theorem, which is a really interesting art project where first it's on-chain art, right? So the images that are produced are SVG from the on-chain. But secondly, it's an NFT collection where if anyone elsewhere in the collection transfers their NFT, the entire collection changes based on generative art. So it's this really interesting proposition where, because all these items exist in the sort of same data substrate, they can collect information from each other. And this is a unique feature of like a blockchain, the fact that you have access to this data substrate automatically, right? So like imagine you had a painting, a physical painting of a collection of an artist you enjoy, and someone in Europe transfers their painting to someone in Shanghai, then your painting will change. You know, you can obviously do that, but now that you have access to this data natively, that's really cool. So I think that's a good example where you reference the uniqueness of the medium.
Yeah, that didn't even cross my mind before, but I love that example. Something else I wanted to ask you about is earlier this year, you had written a blog post about what you call like the CC0 NFT flywheel. And I thought that was really fascinating too. And I want to sort of break that down with you on this podcast. I guess to start with, CC0, Creative Commons 0, is this like no copyright reserved standard, I guess, if you will. Could you maybe start by just explaining what CC0 is, and then we'll get into what this flywheel is that you were talking about?
The basic version of CC0, or Creative Commons 0, is just you allow any usage of the works for any purpose. So for commercial rights, for non-commercial rights, and you don't require people to share alike. It's just do whatever you want. It's kind of similar to public domain, but it's just expressly so. Yeah.
Okay. And then so far with these NFT projects that we've seen, like the big PFP projects, for instance, has CC0 been applied to those NFT projects or not?
Yeah, we've seen CC0 being applied to various NFT projects. And in some cases, some individual artists have also started to adopt it for their own just personal works, not necessarily for PFP collections. Yes.
Okay. And so I think probably the biggest example that people would know would be Bored Ape Yacht Club. If you own a Bored Ape, you can take the art and apply it for any purpose.
So Bored Ape, they're kind of in the middle, right? They're saying that if you own the specific token, then you have the rights to the underlying images represented by this token. Then you can commercially exploit it or do whatever you want. So I can't commercially exploit someone else's Bored Ape, but if I own my Bored Ape, I can commercially exploit it or license it for other people to do stuff with it. Yeah, so it's kind of in the middle. It's always an interesting thing where people trying to figure out, is this model better? Is CC0 better? Like, do you retain your rights? I think this is also part of the exciting period with people experimenting with intellectual property rights, obviously independent of what you actually own that's on the blockchain.
Right. Yeah. So I guess I can't actually think of any examples of NFT projects or artists who have applied CC0 completely. Can you think of any off the top of your head?
Yeah, so Loot is obviously CC0, but and derivatives of it are CC0. You also have, I think, like Gremlins. I might have the wrong name, but there are a bunch of projects that are doing CC0. I think it's Xcopy that recently also made their collection of artworks CC0. Oh, and Moonbirds, I think, also recently there was also drama around the fact that they moved from the Bored Ape model, where only an owner can commercially exploit it, to anyone can exploit any of the Moonbirds for their usage. Yeah.
Okay, so in your article, you talk about some unlocks that we might see if NFTs were CC0 licensed, and you talk about how this could help creators to actually be able to earn more money than they can now. Can you sort of explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so it comes from the hypothesis that like the value of an NFT is derived from its social context, right? So when people go like, hey, I would like this NFT, there comes like a lot of mimetic context and social context that comes around for people enjoying it. It's stuff like the art itself, who owns these collections. Like some people got CryptoPunks because a celebrity had a CryptoPunk, so there's a lot of social embedded context. The meme itself is kind of like the important value driver to why NFTs are valuable. It's kind of that thing where, hey, I own this thing, you own this thing, so we have something in common now. We share some shared language. Like, I understand this meme, you understand this meme. Now we can have a conversation. It's like the idea of like, oh, if you like that band and I like that band, then hey, we share something that is not necessarily something we can put into words. So, and all memes have that. So in the case of NFTs, a lot of the value is derived from the attention it generates and its social context and value that comes from that. And so in the case of CC0, part of the goal of NFTs is to attract an audience of people. When you place that NFT in that social context, it would generate value for those people. So what you want really is you want an NFT to be as unburdened as possible to find the right people that would be willing to buy it and then participate in this sort of relationships that's generated from this communal game that we play around NFTs. So any restrictions reduces its value. Any ability for it to fluctuate and find the right people, that is what you want as best as possible. And CC0, because it relinquishes all rights and relinquishes the ability for it to travel through the web, it's more likely to find the right people that would drive value to the project. There's the theory of the 100 true fans, right? If you have 100 people supporting you, you can be creatively free because they support your lifestyle. But your goal is to find those 100 people, right? So you might create the best work ever, but if your content isn't finding those people, bad luck, right? So the goal of NFTs is for that NFT to travel through the inter highways of cyberspace to find the right people to drive value to it.
Yeah, it's almost like you want as much publicity and visibility as you can, and CC0 licensing enables this for NFTs.
Yeah, it's just more likely, right? It's not necessarily the right approach. It's just you want it to be as unfettered as possible to find the people that will come and participate. Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess, is this also all with the assumption that like creator royalties are in place? And so like if I'm a creator, I want more people to see it. I want my art to get into the hands of more people. I want it to be traded more because I have creator royalties embedded into my NFTs, and thus I'll make a percentage of each sale or trade that's made. Is that the idea?
I would say ideally, yes. But I think that could create residual value where if the values drive back to the collection, like you would see some revenue coming in. But even if there are no royalties, if you get attention, your new works that you can create would have an audience for it. So it's kind of like the same thing where, when Bored Ape did Mutant Apes, there was a huge community of people that wanted that new collection. So yes, royalties is ideal, but I wouldn't say that's the primary driver. It's the fact that you're getting an audience, which is the primary value.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Before we move off royalties, though, I am curious to hear your just general stance on creator royalties. I've sort of heard both sides or the whole spectrum of, people who are super pro creator royalties and they think it's like all about that and creators should set really high royalties. And then the other end of the spectrum that's like, this isn't, the primary driver at all. Like you should look at other things and then everything in between. So I'm curious where you stand.
I think it's a net benefit. Like it should exist in some form, but you're correct in saying like there's obviously some line here somewhere where, obviously we're not expecting it to be 100% or 90% royalties, but we also don't want there to be zero royalties, right? But I think the primary way to think about it is like, why are people paying for something like Patreon? They might want exclusive access, but their primary incentive is still to support the artist because they want more of that stuff that's being created. That is still one of their primary value drivers, things they primarily care about. And so for royalties, what you want is you want the project that you're supporting to continue doing cool stuff. That's important.
Okay, yeah, I completely agree that whatever is best for the artist is what we're ultimately working towards. So totally on board with that. I do want to shift gears a little bit and talk about storytelling for a second, because that's one of your secret powers is storytelling, something that you've done in many different mediums. You actually wrote a novel, a sci-fi novel back in, I believe it was 2019, called The Hoperunners of Gridlock, which is super cool. I'm always curious, like, how did you get the idea to write a novel, and what were some things you learned from that process?
Yeah. Like I said, I'm a creator at heart. I enjoy creating stuff, and writing a novel was always something that sounded an interesting thing to do, both from the creative output, but also like the process. Coming from the tech world where you're kind of used to just going, hey, let me try something on the weekend and publish it and see what people think, to like having to create something that it's going to take me. It took me a year and a half to go from writing to publishing it. Like, that is a completely different experience. But ultimately, like, I had this idea for a story that started in 2018, and it kind of didn't go away. I kept thinking about the story. And then when I was working at Consensus for 4 years, and then I left at the end of 2018 and early 2019, took a bit of a break, and I realized, you know what, if there is ever a time to do this, now is the time. And I wanted to explore becoming a better storyteller, because like you said, it's a thread that's been running through everything that I've been doing, from making games to making music to standing on stage and sharing your project. Everything is about storytelling and sharing your message. Going from that to writing a book was a really awesome experience. I really, really enjoyed the process. Sometimes I feel like storytelling is the same kind of process that you have when you design crypto economic protocols, because you kind of have to feel your way into like this fog and uncertainty, and exploring different incentives, and not really knowing whether it will work unless you just actually move there and experiment with what could happen and what could not happen. So sometimes you feel like you're wrestling with your characters and like going like, what would this person do when this thing happens, and so forth. It's the same kind of thing with like crypto economic incentives, where you go like, well, what if you have a malicious actor that wants to do this thing with your protocol? Like, what are you going to do? So I enjoyed the process, and I really enjoyed writing it. And from then on, it's like, yeah, let me continue writing more stories. I really enjoy the process. I want to become a better storyteller. I have many stories to tell that I want to share, so let's keep doing it. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's so cool to hear. Being a writer or a storyteller probably makes you a better founder as well. I would think, like if you build a protocol, if you're a natural storyteller, you've thought through sort of like all the things that can go wrong, all the ways this can play out, that ultimately will make your protocol or your product better, because you've already thought through a lot of these things that other people might not have. So I'm curious, in your experience with, writing this novel, which I think it was just a sci-fi novel. It wasn't anything crypto related or Web3 related, right?
There are some crypto components in there, and it has some like unique economics in the city that was derived from radical markets and Harberger tax, which, now people are talking about Harberger tax again with the royalties discussions. And radical markets was, Vitalik promoted some of the ideas that was in the book to people. So it's like, hey, let me extrapolate on what the city would look like if it had some of these economics in it. And there's some crypto stuff in there, like blockchain-ish random number generations and stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. I'll have to look for those like hidden Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Have you noticed any differences between storytelling in the traditional Web2 world versus storytelling in a more specific Web3 context?
You're meaning like fiction storytelling?
Or nonfiction? I guess I'm more thinking like when we think about marketing a product in the Web2 space and the stories that we want to tell there, how we craft the narrative, like what parts of that are the most important to bring out versus when we do that exercise for a Web3 project. Are there any noticeable differences that you can think of?
I think one of the things that I've enjoyed more about, storytelling as a broader umbrella for in the Web3 space is that it affords you the opportunity to just be more direct in a way, right? Because first, the medium itself promotes transparency and publicness and open source, and you don't have to like sell anything else in order to support the thing that you're trying to do. Whereas in, like we discussed before in Web2, it's like you're kind of always forced to play this kind of different game than just directly selling to fans or like directly selling to the things that you create. There's this trend where I've seen where some musicians are like, is the expectation now that I have to create these like constant background content on TikTok in any way to like promote my songs and stuff? So it's always like this feeling that I'm always being used to promote something else that I'm not getting value from. Like, oh, I have to use TikTok, but all the value I'm generating for TikTok is not coming back to me. Even book authors are like, there's this entire book talk, right, where people to discuss books and stuff on TikTok, and it's like, well, I don't feel like that's where my audience is, or like why people would care about this stuff. I just wanted more direct relationship. So I think that's some of the things I've enjoyed about Web3 is like, do what you want to do, and you can be more direct about what you're selling, and there hasn't been to have to be sort of this clunky separate monetization model that you have to use, which that's probably my assessment. I think that's like immediate thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, I feel like we can be a lot more authentic in Web3, and we don't feel that pressure so much to hop on the latest trends, even when it doesn't apply to us, just to get some views or get some hits. I totally agree with that. When we think about crafting this narrative around Web3, like when we're talking to a mainstream audience, our friends, our parents, like anybody that doesn't know about Web3, what is that predominant narrative that we should be telling about Web3?
I think it's probably two things. One is that you have access to a more transparent system, more direct, transparent system. And secondly, the ability to support new things or new creation that just wasn't possible before. So it's still, to me, it's like the primary value proposition is to promote it as it won't forever be an experiment, but it is in a way, it's like, let's try something new. Let's not be satisfied with the status quo. Let's figure out different ways we can support people that isn't mediated by platform monopolies or other systems of power that doesn't necessarily satisfy the creator and the fans for that matter.
And what do you think is like the number one mistake that Web3 marketers make, or that just people in Web3 make in general when it comes to crafting this narrative? Because I think a lot of it is getting lost in translation, because a lot of people still think crypto's a scam. A lot of people are still very resistant to, adopting new technologies like blockchain. So something is getting lost in that narrative.
That's a very interesting question, because I think sometimes the things that we think is bad way to promote stuff ends up being correct later on. Like a good example is like back in the earlier days when we tried to build some of the stuff, there was this very large sort of movement to go, hey, like let's hide the blockchain as much as possible. Like let's get people to use credit cards to buy these tokens to interact with the system. Like don't show the people the engine. Like just move away from that as possible. Make it as Web 2.0 as possible. Like hide this engine in the background. And as we've seen, people actually really like just participating in the space because you have this engine in the background, right? So yes, people did an effort to download a wallet, have some seed phrases. Yes, it's not perfect. Doesn't mean this is what's going to be that brings about the next cohort of mainstream users. But that's not actually what mattered, right? It didn't actually matter that we had to promote it as this sort of like Web 2.0 thing with the Web 3 background thing. It's just come on in. We'll help you explain how this stuff works and just come have fun, right? So I think that's one of the things I think where we had it wrong. So asking what's wrong now might also be something that's correct later on. Like one thing that I think that obviously people struggle with is like this feeling that we're financializing everything, right? I think that turns a lot of people off. But here's the thing, right? I don't think people realize to what extent the normal life is also already very financialized as it is. Like, why is it okay to go, hey, I am paying for a Patreon, but it's not okay to buy an NFT, right? It's like, where's the difference here? Like, it feels like it's like there's this sort of nakedness to that's now being shown that was always there all along. But we just didn't see it. It was hidden very well from us. We were being used by platform economies for like selling ads, but we didn't care because we got to see our friends going to parties on weekends, whatever. Yeah. So I think what we get wrong is maybe not necessarily to shy away from the stuff too early when there's like too much of a negative reaction, right? Because the core adopters enjoy the stuff, and that's that's fine.
Yeah, and I think part of that answer that I think is really good too is explain to people, like give examples from history of things that, people were super resistant to at
Mm,
first and then widely adopted later on. Like I know for me personally, like I was very anti-Apple, like anti-iPhone in the early days. I was a
yeah,
BlackBerry Maxi. I was
yeah,
like, iPhone screens, like they don't even have buttons that you can feel like on a keypad. Like this sucks. Like I
yeah,
want a
yeah.
BlackBerry where I can feel the keys. Like this makes so much more sense to me.
Oh yeah.
And, obviously we saw where that went. So yeah, I think examples like that can maybe help people to try and keep a more open mind about all of this. So, last thing, Simon, I wanted to ask you is about your new project, Untitled Frontier, that I think you launched kind of recently. Can you tell people what that is and what your sort of like goals are with that?
Yeah. So I was still really interested in NFTs and coding and building in this space. And I was like, I want to do more storytelling. So it's like, how do I merge these two passions together? So Untitled Frontier it's a fairly simple proposition. It's like we produce speculative fiction and we sell collectibles as memorabilia or souvenirs from these stories. So the relationship mimics how traditional merchandise work. If you loved Star Wars, you go to buy the lightsaber afterwards. So if you love the story, you go buy the digital collectible from this universe. So it's not selling the media itself. It's not like, say, a music NFT or a piece of art. It's like we generate collectibles from the stories. That's something you want to collect. So, for example, the first story that we produced that I wrote, it's about the simulated mind that chooses to move back to reality. And in order to move back to reality to get this like robot body, like you have to get the certificate to prove that you're not human, you're a robot, you're a simulated mind in a robot. And so what we built was you can buy these certificates that's just playful memorabilia from the story. It's like, oh, look, I'm also a robot that has the certificate, right? So that's the kind of relationship that we try to cultivate. But there's so many different ways, and the primary purpose really is to support writers. The goal still at the end of the day is to make sure that if we produce short science fiction, that we make sure that the writers that write the short fiction make more money than they would if they sold that story to a sci-fi magazine. And that bar is actually very low. It's like we need to make sure that for a story written by a short fiction writer, they need to make basically more than $300. you know so
Wow, is
there's
that really it?
and that's probably decent. The thing is, like, people don't really make money from short fiction either. Most writers probably use it as a platform for like building their creative expression, building an audience. Usually from there they gravitate to larger projects or stuff like that. So it's more sort of a proving ground in a way. Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea that was the profits from writing works was so low. That's like really disappointing to hear, actually. For me, like I think the cool thing about these collectibles, and it sort of took me a little bit to understand NFTs and collectibles when I first learned about it, like when was it, in 2020 or whenever I first learned about it, because I didn't grow up collecting anything. Like I wasn't a
Mm-hmm.
collector at all. So it was hard for me to wrap my mind around like, what's the point of collecting these
Right.
things? But the more I think about it, the more I really understand the idea of using NFTs as memorabilia. So, for example, like if I go to an event or if something happens in my life, maybe I just read a really powerful book that I'm really into and that like really changes the way I think or something. I would love to have some token, like some digital memorabilia to help me remember that moment and remember that
Mm.
feeling for a long time without having to accumulate all of these physical material things.
Yeah.
I think, this was like back when I was traveling almost full time, it was like I had a backpack and that was it. Like I don't have the ability
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
accumulate all of these things. And I would
Right.
get random little things, maybe a t-shirt from something, maybe something else from somewhere else. And I couldn't keep all of these things. And so these are a lot of like lost memories that could have been encapsulated by an NFT, for example, or even a
Mm.
POAP or some sort of digital representation that I could carry with me forever. So I think that's really fun. I think
I
it's a
think
cool experiment. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one other way to frame it really is like, when we buy memorabilia or souvenirs, right, and merchandise for that matter, there are certain incentives why we do that. And one of them is like, let's take the example of like you go to your favorite musician concert and you buy the t-shirt afterwards. There's multiple reasons you do that. Is one, like, you want to support the musician. Two, like, you want to anchor your own experience into something more tangible, right? So it's like, if I wear my favorite band t-shirt, it reminds me of that experience and the joy I felt. And then thirdly, it's also a social thing. If you are out and about, you feel like you could share a bit about yourself and expression. And maybe someone goes and comments on your shirt and says, I love that musician too, and then you share that connection with people. So it's really about conversations with others, conversations with the musician, and conversations with yourself. Like, memorabilia is sometimes also a conversation with yourself. You buy this to make you remember something. You buy this to have a conversation with your past and your emotions and processing it in different ways.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so spot on. All right. So to wrap up, Simon, I've got 5 quick rapid fire questions for you. These are just very random questions, some related to Web3 and others aren't. So the first question I have for you is, if you have the opportunity to rebrand one thing in Web3 and it's guaranteed to stick, what do you rebrand?
I would rebrand Web3. The name Web3.
So funny.
No idea what.
Somebody else said that too. What would you rebrand? What would you call it instead?
I have no idea. But I sometimes feel like it encapsulates too many things at once, that it feels like it's a useful branding.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Okay, second question. If you could wave a magic wand and any Web3 app, tool, or protocol would immediately exist, what would you want that to be?
This is a very unique tool that I've been wanting for my project,
Okay.
which is,
Yeah.
I want like more collector book experiences. I find like a lot of the sort of NFT experiences are all marketplace experiences. A lot of them, right? And so I want the feeling of a collector book, like remove all the trading information. It's just about this feeling of like, you haven't collected this sticker yet. Here you can go get the sticker. So it's like a way to build your collection in a unique way. That's all. Yeah.
I like that. Somebody listening, if you want to go build that, Simon will be all over
Please,
it.
I need it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I have to build it.
All right, third question. If Untitled Frontier were a famous person or animal or any character from history or pop culture, who would it be?
Man, that is not not an easy one. Um, maybe something like an eagle, because eagles like having this like broad view of things and trying to explore and trying to see new things and having a bird's eye view of everything.
I like that. And they're just a very like regal and revered animal too, which is also cool. Okay, next question. If money were no issue, would you still be doing what you're doing now, or would you be doing something else?
I would be doing the same thing as I'm doing now. I just enjoy it a lot, and I'm lucky to be able to do this. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, and then last question. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
Um, I wouldn't choose a specific place. I would like to make travel easier, because then I would like to, as I'm originally from South Africa, so I'd like to see it more often and not have it be a 20-hour flight away.
Yeah, so better transportation.
Better transportation.
Nice. I like it. Okay, well, thank you, Simon, so much for your time. Before you go, just tell people where they can find you if they want to follow you, and then also where they can go to check out Untitled Frontier.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I have a pretty unique name. So if you just Google it, then you should be able to find me. But at Simon DLR on Twitter, and Untitled Frontier is UN_Frontier. So _Frontier, and Untitled Frontier.studio as well. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you, listeners,
Thank
for
you.
tuning in, as always. And we'll be back again next week with another episode of Rehash.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Rehash, a Web3 podcast. The guest from this episode, Simon de la Rouviere, was nominated by Karsten and voted onto the podcast by Diana, Nitch, Jonathan Mann, Ellie Dots, Tyler Internet, Karsten, and Scott Moore. Some of the questions you heard were submitted by Karsten. Rehash is hosted by Diana Chen, produced and edited by Ellie Dots and Tyler Internet, sponsored by Lens, Avenue, and Govern, and as always, supported by Rehash DAO. To stay up to date on all things Rehash, you can follow us on Twitter at RehashWeb3 and join our Discord to get involved.